That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, we're getting a little bit further away from spring practice. I'm sure we'll, touch on some random thoughts. I'm sure conversations will carry us different places, but I do have a couple of mailbag questions, and I just thought, okay, with people, we're getting to where we just answer these more commonly, and with it being the off season, let people kind of dictate a lot of what we talk about, right? If you got a question you want to know, we'll discuss it. So we'll go ahead and just dive right in. The first one being about Alabama's pass rush. The question is, I'm worried about Alabama's pass rush. I saw on Bama Online that we only had 25 sacks last season, which was the worst we've seen since 2013. With Jahad Campbell and Q Robinson being gone, where does the pass rush come from? It doesn't matter how good the secondary is if the quarterbacks have all day to throw.
Yeah, I have three answers right away. I mean, I think some people, when they ask that question, they would love to hear an X's and O's answer. I think that's kind of like they would love to hear that we're going to make some sort of adjustment, or that me and you are aware of some sort of thing they're about to do technically that's going to improve things. Or even if the answer is simply like, oh, we hear from the inside, they're going to blitz more, stuff like that. I think that's what they're looking for. Myself, though, I think it's all Jimmys and Joes more than X's and O's and personnel. And I think the pass rush can be better for three reasons. And those three reasons are names. Number one's LT Overton. He was fantastic a year ago in terms of, what the analytics people call win rate, which means when he's going up against someone at the line of scrimmage and it's just him against a tackle, or whatever, LT defeats his blocker and wins that matchup at a tremendous rate. I mean, it's really spectacular. His win rate it's one of the things that got him landed on NFL radar when they'd frankly had never heard of him before last year, and then he landed squarely on the radar. It's because of that win rate, which is responsible for his very high number of quarterback pressures, because his pressure numbers are really good. But what stinks, and I'll be honest, and I would tell it to him even if he's listening to our show today, and I hope LT is listening to the show, and if so, LT, I hope you're having a great day. But if you are listening to the show, I think and we all, you've got to convert more of those pressures into actual sacks. So it's just a half a step. It's just a half a step. And I think if he improves half a step, he could go to an 8 to 10 sack guy. Just like that. His win rate and pressures suggest that's the case. Two other guys I'll be more quick about. Quay Russaw has specifically said he was disappointed in his pass rush a year ago, and that's what he's worked on the whole offseason. This is a guy that's going to play even more snaps in the Tide's chief pass rushing position, which is Wolf. I think you'll see an improved Quay Russaw, and he's going to have some significance with the sacks, and also replacing on the interior defensive line, James Smith stepping in and becoming more of a full-time player. I know he hasn't shown it to date, but I'm pretty confident in asserting that James Smith will be a high-quality interior pass rusher this year. Not Quentin Williams. I'm not saying that. But I think he'll be a quality interior pass rusher. So with those three guys this fall, I think Alabama will be better than a year ago, but I'm not here to tell you that they're going to lead this conference in sacks. I'm not sure that that's this personnel group's capable of that, nor is the scheme, I think, set up to do that. But I do think the pass rush will be good enough to continue to create a high number of takeaways, which Alabama excelled at a year ago, and I think will be just as good this year.
Yeah, a lot of times it's about complementing, right? It's about, figuring out what's your primary goal. I think obviously the primary goal, I guess, for every defense is don't allow the offense to score a lot of points. But there's certain details within that. How do you go about doing that? Is it, being really solid, forcing them into unfavorable situations on third down and then getting off the field? Is it turnovers, sacks? There's a lot of different ways that you can look at it. But, and I think with Kane Womack, the primary goal or the primary focus has always been on turnovers. And so, the way that he schemes things up, the reason that he's able to do some of what he's able to do on the back end, it's like, okay, you send three, you drop, what would typically be that fourth guy, the Wolf. Maybe it's, drop him into the flats or take away something short to where you can get a little bit more help on the deep stuff. Kind of maybe have a robber, cover one robber, cover two robber underneath. A Keon Sab, that was something that was pretty prevalent early last season Or in fact, that was, the interception, at least one of them, and I think both of them that he was kind of playing that robber role underneath and just gave him the freedom to kind of break up on the football and get a turnover. So it's like, but you're going to sacrifice something on the pass rush front if you're only sending 3, and I know a lot of fans don't like that, which I understand. And it's mixing it up. You can't get too committed one way or another. But I think that as far as the personnel is concerned, I think you're 100% onto something. We saw it late last year, and it's something that I noticed in the open practice is like the 4 down linemen, the 4-man front with the 2 double mugs with the inside linebackers where they line up in the A gaps on the ball. And I've brought this up before, but the purpose of that is when you bring 6 guys on the line of scrimmage like that, the offense has to account for everybody, and you don't know who's coming. And that kind of what that immediately does is your running back has to stay in for pass protection, because if they choose to send all 6, they're going to have numbers on you. So if you're planning to send him out in a pass route, it's like that immediately cancels that out. And it's just showing that can really be advantageous. It kind of also, if you're not sending all 6, then it's like, okay, now they're leaving the running back in. That's going to be an extra body for that pass rush. It's going to be a little bit probably harder to get home. So it's like sometimes you want to show those looks for certain reasons. Maybe sometimes you don't. But, that's something that I did notice last year. And I think that they'll continue to do that this upcoming season. They don't have a Jahad Campbell versatile piece set off ball linebacker that you're really going to move around who's playing a lot of snaps. But I'm with you. I think LT Overton's going to be a huge part of it. Him finishing. I mean, you got to think if they had 25 sacks, which I think ranked number 64th in the country, which is barely in the top half of nationally. And it's like, okay, if LT Overton would have just finished on a lot of his plays, he probably would have added at least 4 or 5 sacks to that total. You start getting up in there in the 30 sack range, still not great, but I mean that would jump you about 25 spots roughly as far as nationally. So just finishing would certainly help on that front. I think that they're probably going to commit a little bit more. I think Quay Russaw kind of being lighter, I think he's going to be a more effective pass rusher. I think some situational stuff. I mean, it's like the Alabama struggles on early downs, and I've talked about this a lot, but you didn't position yourself probably enough. Just like offensively, you didn't keep yourself in favorable situations on offense enough. On defense, you didn't put the opposing offense in unfavorable situations enough where you could maybe put some situational pass rushers out there. When it's constantly 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, it's like you got to leave your regular guys out there. So,
you're going to get sacks on 3rd and 10, a whole lot more than you're going to get a sack on 2nd and 6.
100%, especially when you are as aggressive as we're hearing that Kane Womack is being nowadays. That aggression will bite you if the opposing team has their full playbook open. But if you kind of know they're going to be limited to certain things here because it's a very specific situation, you can take advantage of that. You can be aggressive and you can really make them pay for it. So, I think you covered the player side of it. I guess I covered more of the other side. So hopefully that answers the question enough. Next question. What's the latest on Brody Dalton? Heard he was visiting this week, but haven't heard much else. Does Alabama have a chance with him? So you may or may not be, up to date as far as the Brody Dalton talk, but I thought I'd give you a chance.
Yeah, sure. No, he's visiting Tuscaloosa today, I believe, as we record this on Tuesday. I believe today is the day. And look, Alabama hasn't, targeted too many guys, in the portal, and that's what I think what Clint and I both anticipated was Alabama not being very active in the portal, and that's been coming and going. Anyone can argue that that's not a good thing. I think it's a largely good thing, and I think Brody Dalton's a good example of why it's a good thing. He's not a guy that's going to make transfer portal headlines, nor is that ever the intent. What Alabama needs is an additional tight end that I would almost call a situational tight end, a guy capable of playing a bigger role than situational. And he is, because he's a starting tight end, even at the Troy level. So he's capable of playing a lot of snaps. He's 6'5", 250. Who does that sound like? C.J. Dupree, who's gone. C.J. Dupree also sounds a little bit like Robbie Oost, who's around that size. So I think you lose some size. Now you're bringing in size, but you're pretty comfortable with Danny Lewis as your guy. I know he wasn't out there this spring, but let's remember, Danny Lewis is a portal signee. He entered the portal and Alabama recruited him out of the portal. Very similar to any other transfer portal tight end. They basically have to tell him, right, isn't part of the pitch, you're our guy. I mean, that's the pitch. You're our guy. So you get Danny Lewis in, they're comfortable with him. You know they're comfortable with Josh Cuevas, who proved last year he's a good player in a limited role. Now can he handle a bigger role? And I think, can he handle playing some snaps at Y? Because last year, I think he's primarily a move tight end, kind of an H guy, but he did add some weight this offseason. Looked much better to me. But I think between Danny Lewis, Josh Cuevas, and adding a big bodied blocker like Brody Dalton, I think Alabama's tight end room is set. An additional benefit to all of it is now you've given more time to Jay Lindsey, who's a redshirt freshman, to Marshall Pritchett, a true freshman, Caleb Edwards, a true freshman, hadn't even been here yet. Now you're giving them time because you have ample veterans to hold the fort down. And now you're not putting a freshman out there before he's ready. Think about that, guys. A freshman tight end who's not even an offensive lineman, but a freshman tight end has to go up against 23-year-old SEC front seven guys in games. That's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask of an offensive lineman. Now you're asking a 240-pound tackle to go handle 22 and 23-year-old SEC defensive linemen and outside linebackers. It's best that you give those tight ends time to marinate before you throw them out there. So I think adding Brody Dalton will be huge. He's an in-state guy. He's played at UAB. He's played at Troy. He's making a circuit of the state of Alabama. I think Alabama's in a real good position for him. I'll be honest when I say that I would sort of expect him, if we were doing RPM crystal ball type things here, I expect Brody Dalton to pick Alabama. He may not, because for all I know, Cal and North Carolina are telling him, hey, you're our Danny Lewis. You're our Josh Cuevas. Go to Alabama, you're going to be third. Come here, you'll be number one. Cal did lose their starting tight end to Texas. North Carolina is coached by Bill Belichick. Their tight end coach is Freddie Kitchens. You got two NFL head coaches, coaching you over there in North Carolina. I would get the draw to wanting to be a part of that. Gronk played for Bill Belichick at tight end. I'm sure that's part of the pitch there. So I'm not ruling out Cal or North Carolina for him. I'm just saying I think it's going to be Alabama, and I think he's exactly what the doctor ordered for Alabama at the tight end position.
Yeah, 100% correct as far as being exactly what the doctor ordered. Like, this guy fits right in line where it's like, I think he could play at Alabama. I think he could be a fairly effective player at Alabama. I think he would be a part of the plans. Alabama they played three tight ends pretty consistently last year, and Danny Lewis still got close to 100 snaps, like 92 or 93. You look the year before with Kalen DeBoer at Washington with Brian Grubb, they had four different tight ends exceed 140 snaps that season. So that's almost 10 snaps a game for four different guys.
And Danny Lewis was like tight end 4.
Yes.
Because Dupree, Oost, and Cuevas all played more snaps than Danny Lewis. And Danny Lewis at tight end 4 still played 100 snaps. So that's a great point. So this guy would be tight end 3, I think, at worst. But he's got to beat out Jay Lindsey, who I think is going to be a good player, by the way.
Tight end 3 is a bigger position than people realize.
Yes.
Within this offense. And everybody thinks, okay, the wide receiver room is just completely loaded. They're still going to go 12 personnel. I'm telling you.
Yes.
They did it at Washington. That's why you had four different players exceed 140 snaps, because they had a couple of Y options at tight end, even though Devin Culp he didn't really fit that profile. I think they more so did that because Jack Westover was more of your move guy. Culp was a just ultra athletic, more, he ran I want to say a 4.5 40 or something at the combine. So he had, he was very fast. But anyways, they had a couple of inline guys they played, had a couple of move guys they played, including Cuevas being that tight end 3-4. And so there's room for Dalton to not only get involved, but be a pretty big part of Alabama's offense. I think North Carolina is a lot more dangerous because of all the things that you mentioned, and Brian Harsin, for whatever reason, he's just not connecting with people. So I don't know that if maybe he can put on his best salesman suit and get that job done, but I would probably say North Carolina would be the biggest threat. I do want to talk about something real quick, though.
Sure.
Because I think we're talking about it, but I don't think we're talking about it enough. And I think a big part of that is where we're at in the process, like it is possible that we discuss this and 5 Alabama players enter the transfer portal today.
Yeah.
But one of the big things that we have seen for Kalen DeBoer everywhere he's been, and it could be coaches, it could be players, it is loyalty. You had an offensive coordinator last year. How often do you see a guy essentially get demoted and stay on staff? And
almost never. Almost never.
And
because that's what happened. People say he wasn't demoted. Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
he was.
He was the offensive coordinator last year. He's the quarterback's coach this year. He was the pay might have not decreased. I don't know what they did with that. Probably
he might have some sort of title, but
but he absolutely would. But that's not I'm glad, and I think that was a smart move by him to stick around. To be honest, but I am saying that you don't. There are very few coaches that would have happened with, and then what you're seeing in the transfer portal right now is Alabama doesn't have. I mean, they haven't had a player enter up to this point. Correct. And it's like, I don't think people understand if this becomes semi the norm, which I'm not saying that they're going to go 2 portal windows every year and they're not going to lose. They're going to lose probably quite a few players, but I'm saying relative. You've got a lot of depth and competition at some of these positions, and you would think, okay, someone's going to take the easy way out. They're either going to chase a paycheck or they're going to chase playing time, a better spot on the depth chart. And it's like these guys are like, man, but I have a chance here and I want to stay here. I would rather do it here. And so it's like, and a lot of these guys are pretty young. So it's like, I got some time. It's not like if I don't make a move now, I'm going to be, I'll be out of eligibility. Like, but it's their ability to retain that up to this point that I don't feel like we're talking about enough, and what that could potentially signal for what Alabama's going to be, which is in a transfer portal era. They're maybe losing a little bit less than some of these other top programs. That could make all the difference in the world as far as you chasing a national championship.
I love how you bring that up, because that is such a great point. Now, I'm going to sit here and tell everybody listening that this translates into wins. I don't know that it will. I don't know that it does. But I think what I'm about to say is important, though, and that is it is completely clear as to all of Clint's points that the players like playing for Kalen DeBoer. They like him. Do y'all think that we have players on the team that don't like Kalen DeBoer? I don't believe that. I think they like him. I think they also like Nick, but I'd use another word about Nick. They respected Nick Saban. They respected him. And I'm not saying they don't respect Kalen DeBoer. I'm just saying they like him. That's the first word I'm going to pick. They like him. And that has to count for something, because it engenders this loyalty. And when there'll be some fans out there, some listeners saying, well, they're kids. They all like their coach. That's not true. And most everybody who listens to the show, man or woman, almost all of y'all have played on teams growing up. Did you always like your coach? Even going back to Little League, did you always like every coach you ever had? So it is a thing, especially at this crazy high level when everyone likes the coach. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that translates into X number of wins. It may translate into 0 wins. But I do think in this age of the transfer portal and NIL and Alabama discounts in the NIL and kids wanting to play for Kalen DeBoer, I think it does mean something. And I think it's a heck of a take. And like Clint said, it's not talked about enough about Alabama not losing guys in the portal. And sure, like Clint said, as soon as we say that, 6 guys go in this afternoon. But I don't think that's the case. The portal's been open a full week now. Right. No Alabama entries yet. Doesn't mean there won't be 1 or 2. But so far, the damage looks minimal, and I attribute it to the kids like Kalen DeBoer, and that's a positive thing.
It's that they like Kalen DeBoer. It's that they like their position coaches. They feel like they're going to develop under this staff, and I think we've talked about the development side and how they're recruiting and evaluating recruiting and then developing. Like the development side, it's like, okay, even if you're sitting or not, you don't have a major role, you're getting better, behind the scenes. And so, and there's a lot as far as the timing of this. There are certain positions where you can transfer and probably earn some sort of role, in a 4-month span, but it's that much more difficult. And so, I definitely don't think we're talking about that enough. I definitely agree with you that I feel like a lot of the pitches have been made. You know what I'm saying? Like there were guys on Alabama's roster that other teams were like, we need to, kind of prod him a little bit, say, hey,
No
you
doubt.
want to, yeah, I mean, there's offers being made, playing time, money. And so I think a lot of that has passed. Now, some team might get desperate and take some swings right here at the end, or maybe there's a guy who's contemplating it, waiting to see, what. But I mean, and this I think also plays a part. And I mentioned this last week, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this. I also think the 10-day portal window, letting that pass before you start making moves, because here's the thing, like Brody Dalton doesn't really threaten Danny Lewis. He will be competition. So if Danny Lewis just really doesn't do what he needs to do, I'm not saying Dalton wouldn't overtake him as the starting wild tight end, but what I am saying is that he shouldn't be really perceived as a threat. A lot of these guys that they're recruiting, they want like depth at a lot of positions, but you never know when someone's going to take that as a slight, and now they're going to jump in the portal because they don't believe you. And then you end up, let's hypothetically say, okay, but Brody Dalton comes to Alabama. That upsets Jay Lindsey. Jay Lindsey jumps in the portal. I mean, I think overall right now, Dalton's probably a little bit better of a player. But overall, how much did you really gain there? From a number standpoint, you didn't. From I think Lindsey, if he would have been tight end 3, I don't think that would have been terrible. So, I think there is, this is the way I put it last week. I think there is kind of a game being played in a sense where it's like, okay, we don't want to push for a bunch. We don't need all the high caliber guys. Everybody's courting them, going after them, throwing money after, but that's not Alabama's plan. So you can kind of let this window pass, let it close, lock in all your guys, and then you can go fill in those couple of depth holes that you're maybe looking for some help without the threat of actually losing guys as a result or a response of that. I mean, they've been connected to essentially nobody outside of Brody Dalton. Maybe that I've come across. So I think that's intentional. I don't think that the only position they're looking to add out of the portal is tight end. So, I just wanted kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I'm sure they're looking around to see where they can add depth. They're not going to add some splashy starter, number one, because it's not 100% necessary. And number two, a splashy starter is expensive, and it has not been Alabama's style under DeBoer to be big spenders in the portal. Now, Alabama are spenders. I can prove that in any number of ways. Number one, we already talked about on the show, no one's left. One of the reasons no one's left is because they're pretty well compensated at Alabama. That's how everyone stays, because everyone feels like they're being treated pretty fairly when it comes to NIL. So Alabama is a spender. They wouldn't recruit out of high schools and have the number 2 or 3 class in the country if they weren't spenders. They would have lost Damani Jackson and LT Overton and even Deontay Lawson. All those guys would have gone to the NFL if they weren't paying competitive NIL money. So Alabama's a spender, but where Alabama maybe doesn't spend like, say, an Ole Miss does is in the transfer portal specifically, because it's a philosophy thing. But I like adding depth in the portal. And like you said, I think he's very unlikely to offend anyone in the tight end room. I think the tight end room is going to well receive. They know what happened this spring, where you in the spring with only Jay Lindsey healthy. They know that. But here's the thing. We just talked about how nice Kalen DeBoer is and his assistants, right? We just talked about that. If the pitch to Danny Lewis in the winter portal was, don't go anywhere, you're our guy, and you need to stay here, you'll be the guy. So he goes, okay, I'll come back and I'll be your guy. And then the next thing we do is go in the spring portal and go get a starting tight end. What have we just done to Danny Lewis? I mean, that's the sort of thing that makes the players not like their coach, because they would have said that was a bald-faced lie to me and I feel misled, and
other
somewhere else I'd be the starter.
Other players see it too.
That's exactly right. It's not just him. That word like that gets around, and they're nice guys. So that's another reason. And of course, I'm just imagining these conversations they have with these players, but it just makes all the sense in the world. They had to get Danny Lewis to stay or get out of the portal and come back. There, starting spots aren't promised, but what you say is, you're our guy. And when you look at the depth chart, he clearly is. I mean, he's the oldest guy. He's played with the ones. It's his turn. It's his time. It's easy to imagine that that's the pitch. And if that's the pitch, you can't 4 months later go in and get his replacement when he's not in the spring portal. So that's the kind of team building that is smart, and it's why players like playing for Kalen DeBoer.
I also think it says something about how your coaching staff feels about his roster. I mean, right now, Georgia is targeting pass rushers. Why are they doing that? They don't feel great about their
What
pass
they have.
rushers.
Yep.
They see a glaring weakness or hole that they need to target and try to get fixed or remedied, or it could be a problem this fall. Alabama is looking at its roster, and granted, there are certain positions. I don't think the offensive line potential pieces in the transfer portal are all that great. So it's like, and we've already said, like the ones who are, decent, it's like they're wanting a guaranteed starting job. They're getting thrown a lot of money because there are some teams that are pretty desperate for starters that are willing to throw a lot of money at them right now. So it's like, okay, you're probably not going to win out on some of those battles. So that I'm not saying, they feel just amazing about the offensive line and the depth and stuff. But what I am saying is overall, there is not a spot that they're looking at, and they feel desperate to go target people in the portal, but also overpay them, because right now that is exactly what's happening. Cats are getting overpaid because of the supply and demand.
Because they're free agents. And I think one last thing, and again, while we're imagining all these conversations, let's imagine one in the staff room. I know a lot of, when I read on the boards and Twitter, I read a lot of why in Alabama going and getting a tackle. There's tackles in the portal. Why in Alabama going to get one? Well, what if you have this conversation? What if this conversation happens in the staff room? Hey, there's this tackle in the portal that I think would be really interested in us. And then the question is, okay, is he better? Is he an upgrade to Wilkin Formby? If the answer is, I don't know, maybe, or yeah, he's older, yeah, he's a little better, but the other half of the conversation is, oh, and we got to pay him more than we pay Proctor and Brailsford?
Which, by the way, how's that going to go over?
How does that go over? So now you're bringing in a guy that is only arguably a little better, but you've disrupted the whole room, because now you're bringing in a guy who's probably not as good as the left tackle and the center, but you had to pay him so much money because he's a free agent in the portal. And see, all these conversations have to have, it's not just so simple as, hey, I think this guy in the portal might be better than the guy that we currently have slated to start. It's complicated with a lot of moving parts, and all those conversations have to be had.
That you're 100% correct. And that's the thing, is like, I don't even think that conversation's happening regarding Wilkin Formby. I think that conversation's happening regarding Jackson Lloyd and Olasalinen and Arkel Nugum. It's like, are they, because I'll tell you right now, I don't think anybody in the transfer portal is better than Olasalinen and how he's developed at tackle, or is better than what you're probably going to get at Jackson Lloyd once he gets a little bit of experience. He's going to have some growing pains. He's a young player, but you'll be way better at the end of the year with that guy as your, OT3 or however you end up playing it.
And you bring somebody in, you probably run them off. They're going to be upset.
Exactly.
Understandably upset.
And you're going to have to pay whoever you bring in that's even remotely close to even like those guys starter caliber money. And then like you're going to have problems. Like Cam Dewberry's like, what? Wait a minute. I'm projected to be the starter because there wasn't as many options back in, or there were a lot more options, back in the winter. You're paying me half of what you're paying this guy, and this guy's you're simply bringing in as a depth option. It's like right now, I'm doing some stuff to help with Mississippi State, so I've been looking at their roster, watching a ton of film on them. They are in a position where they have to go out and get somebody that is not really a great starting caliber player, but it's better than what they got. And so they don't really have a choice. They got to figure out and get better, because I think not only is the top of their depth chart in rough shape from a starting standpoint, but also from a depth and practice standpoint and getting your starters ready. Like, you can't have the drop off that they have right now. Alabama's in nowhere close to that position. So it's an unrealistic ask of your coaching staff. It's an unrealistic scenario where you're going to get a capable guy who's going to be willing to come in and either compete for the job. You got to pay him a lot of money. It's just way too much of a headache. It is, and Alabama is in good enough shape where they're like, and I think Olasalinen probably need to be talking about him a lot more, because I think what he did was they like where Jackson Lloyd and potentially at some point Arkel and Nugum can be. But I don't think the coaching staff would be viewing them as like, hey, if something happens to a starter, we probably don't feel good about the short term having to turn to one of those two guys, because they probably need some seasoning. Olas, I think, provides them with that, where it's not going to be great. You're going to have some rough moments. You might even have if he had to go in there, especially at left tackle, you might have the Chris Owens at right tackle situation. But I will say, compared to some of these other programs and stuff, it's certainly not great by Alabama standards, but it also could be a lot worse. And so it's like, I think his development this spring was massive as far as them getting over. I think they like his upside at guard, but I think they also feel like he's developed into a guy who can play 4 of the 5 positions.
I think he's a major story of the spring about how tackle was a major depth issue this spring. I don't think it's quite as bad in the fall when you get Proctor back.
Right.
But it was a huge problem in the spring in terms of just practicing. And DeBoer was never going to say it. And maybe it wasn't the primary thing, but the depth was so bad at a couple of places. It would have been very, very difficult to break into 2 teams and play a whole game. That would have been really difficult. And tackle was one of the main reasons. But Olas, I thought, was better than some people might think. Well, that was just a plug to keep the boat from sinking. No. He's pretty good. He's pretty good. He is pretty good. And that's playing a new position. He's primarily played guard in his time at Alabama. And he may eventually be a starting guard at Alabama down the road. But the fact that I think Olas sort of developed as a third tackle behind Proctor and Formby, like Clint said, I mean, the last thing you want to do is throw a Jackson Lloyd or Arkell out there when they're not ready. I mean, I don't think everyone realizes how big confidence is for these guys. And if your confidence gets destroyed and you have to go home and look in the mirror and say to yourself, I don't think I'm good enough to play at this level, it takes a long time to get that back. A long time. Right. That's why you can't play players before they're ready. I mean, we can bring up numerous examples at numerous positions, and we won't do that on today's show.
Formby last year.
That's a perfect example. A job is, if you have a redshirt freshman starting on the offensive line at Alabama, sometimes that might mean that the player is spectacular. But many times it means you should have had an older kid ready,
And Caden Proctor going down like he did, which is what forced, it was a competition at right tackle with Elijah Pritchett. They ended up having to kick Elijah to left, and that forced Wilkin to where it wasn't like getting your feet wet, rotate in, getting comfortable. It was trial by fire those first couple of weeks, and USF did some things to really make his life difficult that he wouldn't see that every week, but it equated to a really rough performance.
And I know as a redshirt freshman and not a true freshman, but you're still a freshman because you haven't really played. And this is something Nick Saban would tell kids in the recruiting process, because he would recruit kids and they all want, he's recruiting these superstar players. They all want to play as freshmen. So Nick Saban would tell a lot of kids this, and I get the story from Saban. It's not a secret, but Saban would ask these kids, hey, let me ask you something. You're just finishing up your high school career. Were you a better player in the 12th grade or in the 9th grade? And they all say, well, I was a better player in the 12th grade. And Saban says, then why don't you think that's going to be the case in college? Right. Why don't you understand that in college you're going to be a better player as a junior or senior than you are as a freshman? Because that's exactly what happened in high school. Sure, 9th grade at your high school, maybe you were one of the better kids on the team. It was remarkable that you played as much as you did as a 9th grader, but you were a better player in the 12th grade than you were in the 9th grade. And that same thing is going to happen in college. So that's a great point about Formby. And for those that think, I've seen Formby play, he's not the answer. You saw Formby play as a redshirt freshman before he was probably really ready to play. Now he's more ready to play. And I still don't think we're going to see Formby this year, the Formby that you're likely to see in 2026.
That's right.
But you will see a better Wilkin Formby than the one you saw last year.
Hey, Caden Proctor wasn't it at one point at tackle too. Terry and Arnold wasn't it at corner at one point. Kool-Aid McKinstry wasn't it at corner at one point. Like, yeah, I mean, how many examples do you have to see before you finally realize, man, maybe they weren't it at that time? That doesn't mean that they're never going to be it. I do want to bring up like Casey Poe's been seeing some snaps at tackle, at right tackle. I think he's a good player. I think he's a much better fit on the inside. I think Link's kind of a problem for him on the outside. But they've, through necessity, Nolan Asbury was and I think I said that last name right, was a walk-on pass rusher. And I'm sure you saw the clips that the practice clips that he posted. He entered the transfer portal. And, I thought he actually looked, 6'1", 225 as an edge. It's just like way undersized, doesn't have a lot of length. But as far as the nuances of playing the position, he's good. He was good. Yeah, I was impressed, but I'm
100% convinced he's an SEC football player. That's what I think of that kid myself.
I'm a fan. I am a fan. And I do wonder where he'll end up, because I do think if he was 6'4", 240, he would absolutely – the SEC teams right now probably wouldn't be transferring because he would be a part of Alabama's plans. But the lack of length and stuff, I do think it probably hurts him at times, but just he's going to put his best on tape for you with those clips that he shared. But what it did do is I love watching that stuff, and I watched that for other guys every bit as much as I do that
guys.
player.
Yeah.
And what it did show me was Casey Poe either A, has a really long way to go at tackle, or he's not a tackle. That was one of those two things. Because I mean,
probably both.
Took him in the woodshed a couple times, and you know,
that's why Nolan's showing it. But
that's exactly. And Arkel Nugum, you know, I saw his rawness on tape. I mean, there was at some point, I don't remember the exact. I mean, Nolan pretty much came free, and Arkel just I don't know. It was weird, but it just, you know, you can tell he's not a guy who has played a lot of football. He's still learning and developing. So, you know, just something else worth mentioning.
Nolan is a good player. You know, when I read that he's in the portal, if you'd have told me that in the news release that Asbury had been placed on scholarship at Alabama or has entered the transfer portal, that's equal news to me. I wouldn't have been surprised. I'm not surprised he's in the portal. I wouldn't have been surprised if Alabama kept him by putting him on scholarship. I mean, that's how I feel about him. I think that's a legit player. He's just got an extremely difficult path at Alabama of ever getting on the field because he is playing an extremely stacked wolf spot at Alabama and is highly unlikely to play ahead of Rousseau and Pierre and Latham and Noah Carter and now Justin Hill. But Nolan Asbury is a good football player, and this spring wasn't the first time I noticed him.
Yeah, if I was a coaching staff, I'd probably move him off ball. I'd probably Jahad Campbell him.
He's kind of built more like that.
Yeah, and then let him be a situational guy. You know, I mean, where you're not, if you put him out there all the time, the length is going to show up. But if you put him out there situationally, you can, you know, limit how much his lack of length hurts you.
It's probably hell on special teams too.
Oh yeah, and I mean, you could tell by watching him. Like, I guarantee you, he was a walk-on, but he was making guys better.
And a late bloomer. I know my Mobile area very, very well. I don't brag much, but I do know high school football prospects in the Mobile area well. Nolan's from Mobile, and I was unaware of him when he walked on. I didn't know him. He played at Davidson. I didn't know him, so he's clearly a late bloomer type kid. And I hope wherever he goes, he has success. He's a good player.
Absolutely. Last thing, and I'm sure we won't spend a ton of time on this. Someone asked, I mean, the NFL draft's on Thursday. Question simple, Jimmy. Gut feeling, does Jalen Milroe go in the first round on Thursday?
I say no. I don't believe he will, but I do think he will go in the second round. That's kind of where I've projected him all along. The short answer to that is I think the best comp from Milroe out there, period, weirdly, and I would say this even if he wasn't at Alabama, is Jalen Hurts. I think Hurts him. Now, they're not carbon copies. They're not exactly alike. But to me, they're just really similar in so many ways, especially the intangibles part of it and the athleticism part of it, and the fact that they both had a lot of development in front of them after the draft in terms of being a passer at that level. And I've always compared Milroe to Hurts in that way. And Jalen Hurts went in the second round. So I think Milroe goes in the second round. And then now I watch the draft coverage every day and have a pretty good idea what's going on in the draft. And now I feel like the draft board is falling that way as well. So I say sometime in the second round.
I think it's possible that someone trades up for him. You know, the Giants sitting there at 34. I believe the Browns are sitting at 33. That's possible. Like the Tommy Reese connection with Cleveland. And here's the thing. I don't think Shedeur is going to the first round either.
No. Well, I don't think he's going to go high in the first round. I think if he goes in the first round, he's going to fall.
I think it's going to be. I think his only chance of going in the first round, and I have no problem admitting if I'm wrong, but I think it's L.A. at 26, LA Rams, or it's someone. It's Cleveland or New York Giants moving up to get him. I think really that's his. I mean, maybe the Seahawks, Saints. I don't know if they have the capital and they have way too many. You know, they got an aging roster. I don't know if they would trade back up into the first. But you know, I do think that Milroe right now, he does have an extremely high ceiling. And what I didn't like about the first round is the first round, like from a GM's perspective, you got to hit that. And if he does go in the first round, I don't think it's just the most absurd thing ever because the traits are off the chart. And if he hits, he's going to hit massive. in a massive way. But I think when you get that bona fide stud, like a lot of, obviously everybody's going to exit the first round thinking they got a dude. If you get that guaranteed guy, you feel better about, okay, now we can match him with a high upside guy like Jalen Milroe, and we're either going to absolutely destroy this draft, or as long as our first round pick hits and maybe some guys behind him, you can get that one guaranteed starter. It's like you feel better about the risk. And I don't think you'll have the pressure to get pushed in to a starting job too early. I do not like Pittsburgh. I mean, I like the offense, with the receivers, and I think they've really invested in the offensive line. But I'm telling you, Mason Rudolph, he got them by a couple of years ago down the stretch. They ended up letting him go to Tennessee. Now he's back in Pittsburgh. But I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, I think that if Milroe ends up in Pittsburgh, I think he'll get pushed into the starting role too early, and that worries me.
I don't. I mean, I'm a big Jalen Milroe fan. Of course, I'm a fan of all of them, but I'm a fan. I want things to work out for Jalen Milroe, and it would be delicious if Milroe developed into a star quarterback in the NFL. It would be just delicious. I would love it. And I say that to say this: the higher he gets drafted, the more likely it is he'll be put on the field too quickly, and it could ruin him. And I know the last thing he wants to hear from some idiot like me is, Jalen, the best thing for you would be the third round. But in the third round, guys, don't get pushed to play. You're going to maybe the Rams or the Seahawks or the Detroit Lions, which I think would be great because he'd be with Terry on, and then you back up Jared Goff until he's ready to call it quits in 2 or 3 years or move on. And I think that would be ideal. But the Rams after Stafford, that would be ideal. But if he gets drafted high and goes to Cleveland or the Giants or Pittsburgh or New Orleans and has to play now, I would worry for him. And hey, Mahomes sat. He's probably the best that's ever done it. He sat. Tom Brady didn't play right away either. He sat behind Bledsoe. Aaron Rodgers sat. Jordan Love sat.
Phillip Rivers sat behind Drew Brees. I mean,
sitting is good. Bryce Young sat at Alabama behind Mac Jones. That worked out. Tua basically sat behind Hurts for a while. That worked out. I think it'd be the best thing for him. So I'm sort of rooting for him to go later to a team with an established quarterback, because if he goes early to a team that's desperate for a quarterback, it could just be a bad recipe for him, and I'll worry for him.
That's exactly right. And that's, that's why I really like the Rams. Browns, it's like they got guys. I mean, they signed Joe Flacco. They got Kenny Pickett that they traded for. So it's like they got dudes that they could start early. Giants is one. It's like, okay, you sign Jameis Winston, you sign Russell Wilson. If he ends up there, it's like, okay, don't feel like they'll force him necessarily.
Yeah, not game one, but you just can foresee those guys failing potentially. Right. Pickett fails, Flacco fails, Russ too old and broken down. He fails, and then the fans are like, play the young guy, because the fans are NFL the same as college. Play the young guy, play the young guy, play the young guy, and then it's just too soon. I mean, if he gets drafted in the third round by the Rams, are the Rams fans ever going to be sitting around all year going, we need to put Stafford on the bench and play Milroe? No, they're not. They're going to forget he's on the team for 2 years, which is ideal.
Malik Willis got pushed into action too soon. Looked terrible with the Tennessee Titans. I'm talking about awful.
Yes.
And then he got to sit behind Jordan Love when they traded him to the Packers, and he goes back out there after getting to sit for a little while. Looked way better. Bryce Young gets benched.
Perfect
gets to
example.
Sit and learn for a little
Bryce
while.
played. He was a number 1 pick. Still played too early.
That's 100%. I mean, he literally got drafted, and they were like, that's our guy. Immediately named him the starter for that entire offseason. And I mean, I understand why they went that direction, because if I'd have thought, okay, his questions were never, would he be, him developing? It was always size and how that would hold him back. And so it's like, if you thought he was ever going to be your dude, he can be your dude from day one with the way that he processes and the mental side of things. But even he needed to kind of step back, see how it all plays out.
Until he got benched. Heck, he got benched.
And then he came back way better. And we can come up with tons of examples for that. And in certain guys, it's like you put them out there and they just get it. So that's not a guarantee.
Well, Kalen Russell this fall at Alabama.
That's right.
I think will be well served by watching Todd do it and sitting on the sideline with Nick Sheridan while Nick Sheridan coaches him during the game. I think would be invaluable.
That's 100% correct. And there's teams all over the place. It's like going into, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like road stadiums they're going to be playing in this year. Auburn at the end of the year, obviously. But it's like, great example. It's like that type of game, witnessing it and seeing like good game going back and forth, a lot of pressure, crowds going crazy, seeing it and just knowing what it's actually going to be like to be on the sidelines for that, I think really calms the nerves. Jimmy, is there anything else that you want to add to the conversation before we hop out of here?
Well, I could do a show with you that would last multiple hours to the point people would be throwing they would be taking their radios and throwing it out the window of their car, because I could just talk to you about Alabama football all day and all night, but we'll just save it for next time.
That's right. I love it. We got a long off season, so we were kind of hitting this lull, but we appreciated all the questions today. I thought they were all great, and I thought we got some good conversation in on it. Appreciate everybody who's tuning in. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps us. And then give it to covercrimson.com and sign up for the message board. Jimmy, once again, I appreciate you, and we will definitely have to do this again soon.
See you soon, buddy.